Look at me doing that now. Welcome back. Arizona is currently grappling with unprecedented affordable housing and an eviction crisis, resulting in staggering increases in individuals enduring life-threatening economic hardships and oftentimes experiencing homelessness. At the Arizona Faith Network this year, we've remained committed to continually seeking innovative and creative solutions to these pressing issues by engaging and exploring faith communities' valuable role in mitigating these challenges. And in collaboration with our dedicated partners at WHEAT, the Arizona Food Bank Network, Lutheran Advocacy Ministries of Arizona, Pinnacle Prevention, Arizona Faith Network has played a pivotal role in developing an organization called the Anti-Hunger Alliance of Arizona, which is actually just a partner to highlight the work that all of us are doing and serving as a bridge in that education. That mission for that organization is a community of partners that are using the expertise of those who develop policy, those with the drive and a passion for advocacy to eradicate hunger across Arizona. Beloveds, we hope that if you are moved by today or this evening's conversation with Ashley, that you consider becoming engaged in whatever way that is. We have a wonderful program tonight with Ashley, who's going to give us an update on kind of what's happened this year from a legislative standpoint, what is happening nationally at the farm bill that we heard from a couple months ago, but we'll get an update on that and what that means specifically to Arizona, as well as some other things that they're working on and how we can do that advocacy work in 2025. Y'all, it's almost there. We're almost there. And so if this program moves you beyond advocacy, we invite you to try to consider donating $5 to $10 to $20 to Arizona Faith Network to help our impactful work to still go. Your partnership is what makes Arizona communities thrive. And we also invite you to sign up for our Faith Forum, which is a wonderful opportunity for you to opt in and out of news, updates, and all of that wonderful stuff. I'll put those links into chat momentarily. And so I'm just so honored to present to you, Ashley. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And I am going to turn. And yes, the recording will be sent out. In fact, the playlist, it's a YouTube playlist of all of these Hunger and Housing 101 series this year will be sent to you. And so just be sure that you have, if you've registered for this, you will be one of the ones getting the email. But thank you so much. I'll turn it over to you. Ashley, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm just so happy to be here and in this space with you. And that was the loveliest introduction I think I've ever received. So thank you, Ellie, and the Arizona Faith Network in general. It's just such an awesome partner. You guys are involved in so much. So I didn't say this before the recording started, so I'm going to say it now, but your haircut also looks amazing. So
thank you. Stitches.
Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and share my screen. And then it looks like you're seeing my presentation. Yes?
We are, yes.
Okay, awesome. It's been a little while since I've done this on Zoom. But as Ellie said, I'm Ashley St. Thomas, the Public Policy Director at the Arizona Food Bank Network. I've been with the organization almost 7 years, which is crazy. Always in the policy space. My title has changed a little bit here and there, but have worked at the state and federal level on food policy and expanding access to benefits that allow people to buy food. So feel free to interrupt at any time. If there are questions in the chat, I might not be able to see them. So Ellie, feel free to shout those out. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about, hold on a second, who we are and what we do, just briefly, to speak to the food banking side of obviously our food bank network. And then I'll talk more about the policy and advocacy side of things. So we are the statewide emergency food system. And so there's 4 member food banks in our organization. You can see them listed there. I apologize, 5. And together they work with about 1,000 partner agencies throughout the state to feed people in need across all 15 counties. And so that's predominantly a large portion of the work that our team does, is to support those food banks in transportation, distribution, storage of food that goes directly to folks in need. And then we also have an innovation and advocacy team that works on the long-term solutions to ending hunger. This is some data from Feeding America, just to sort of level set on where we are, and it's not great, but there's about 900,000 people across Arizona that were food insecure. The most recent data is from 2022. That's a lot, obviously. That's close to 1 million people, and that's about 13.1% of people across the state. And if you look at the child hunger rate, it's even higher, which it's about 1 in 5. So our food banks do a fantastic job of trying to meet that need on a day-to-day basis, but obviously without large or long-term changes, we're not going to see the needle move all that much. I'll just say most recent data from DES, the Department of Economic Security, which it sounds like you're all savvy and know the DES. They are the SNAP state agency, and also they support all of the programs that our food banks operate. So their data shows that about 953,000 people participated in SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, in the month of June. And that, since I joined the organization, is the highest I've seen it. So obviously we know the need is great, and people continue to enroll in different benefit programs to try to meet the needs of themselves and their families. This is just a very simple graphic that shows sort of where food, one of the questions I get a lot is, where do food banks get their food? And this shows sort of, it comes from all sorts of places, farms and fisheries. They donate a lot of product that they can't sell. And there are tax credits for that here in Arizona, which is great. We do retail rescue from grocery stores and restaurants. Government commodities, those are the USDA programs that our food banks operate, and manufacturers, distributors, and consumers. And so all of that is donated and then gets out through the food bank network to the community. In 2023, the food banks were feeding about 550,000 people per month. Again, that's an escalation. It's higher than it was pre-pandemic. And then this outlines kind of a very simple graph, but it just shows that that dip in participation kind of runs in parallel with the increase in food. So during the pandemic, when there was additional resources available to both individuals and food banks, we actually saw a decline in food insecurity, which is not unexpected from where I sit. When people have more resources, they use them to purchase food and to meet the basic needs of themselves and their families. So to the pie chart also just kind of shows the breakdown of where food gets sourced from our food banks and food drives, which I think churches are very well known for. Houses of worship are 1% of that pie, which seems small, but obviously still very important. And I think it also spreads, the goodwill of the community in helping each other. So that can't quite be measured there, but happy to answer any questions about food banking. And then this kind of outlines a little bit more of our role. So we have expanded from a team of 7 when I started to a team of 50. And we have a whole warehouse and drivers and trucks and stuff down in Nogales. That No Borders, No Limits produce program is a food rescue program for produce that's coming over the border from Mexico, and is just about to the point where it can't be put on shelves. And so we have a team of folks that source that produce and then repack it into family-friendly produce boxes. And that's pretty unique in the world of food banking. No other state is doing that. And it's really been a boon to food banks and also obviously the folks that visit food banks. The Southwest Produce Cooperative is a shared sourcing of produce across states in the Southwest region that's hubbed here in Arizona. The team down there also operates the Friends of the Farm program, which is a farm to food bank program that we launched right when the pandemic hit, that works exclusively with small growers across Arizona to purchase food directly from them. So initially it was just produce. Now there's more resources, so they're able to purchase protein, eggs, dairy, some meat, and pay market rate for that. So that's again another, pretty exciting pilot here in Arizona that other states are trying to model, because it's a full food system that is working on all levels for consumer and grower. And then we have AmeriCorps, that's a program that's sunsetting, but they've done phenomenal work for us in the past. And then our advocacy is focused on state and federal, and I'll talk a little bit about lobbying. And our innovation team, they target specific populations to not only make sure that any USDA or federal programs are operating effectively within those populations, but to look for different solutions, right? Food pantries and SNAP benefits aren't the answer for everyone. And so that team does really granular level work to make sure that people are getting their needs met. So Ellie mentioned the Arizona Anti-Hunger Alliance, and we had a really fantastic day at the Capitol at the state legislature this year, where Ellie was the MC, and it was great. So there's some photos from that, but this is just an overview kind of what advocacy we do here at the Arizona Food Bank Network. Again, it's really targeted at the state legislature and then with our members of Congress. And with the federal context, there's really sort of 3 avenues for where we can intervene on things. And one of the largest is the Farm Bill, and the other is, the other is the budget. And then there are sometimes some small glimpses that we may see a child nutrition reauthorization bill, which is another omnibus bill similar to the Farm Bill, that hasn't been reauthorized since 2010, but that's where all of the school meals programs live. We also do administrative advocacy. So those two, the legislature and Congress, are obviously legislative, but administrative advocacy is just as important. And that really just boils down to working with state and federal agencies that implement these programs, that implement these laws. So working with DES on the rules and regulations of how these programs operate is just as important, in my opinion, as changing the laws, because oftentimes we hear from folks where the problems are with accessing these benefits or accessing these programs, and the way to intervene there is to work with the state agency. Similar at the federal level, that would be with USDA. A lot of what we do is building relationships and coalitions, because obviously the more voices, the better on particular issues. And we've done a lot of work as an organization to build better relationships with the community that our food banks serve, and that use these food and nutrition programs. So we're building a community advisory council. We've been working on it for a couple of years, and hopefully we'll be able to launch something pretty soon. And we've done that a lot in partnership with the Arizona Faith Network. And then the last 2, raising awareness and then education. I think oftentimes when people hear advocacy, they think of lobbying, and that is a part of what we do. And lobbying is really just asking directly, asking an elected official to take a direct action on a piece of legislation or a budget, which the budget is a piece of legislation. And if you're an organization like ours, it's you have to be careful of what percentage of time you do lobbying, but an individual can ask, a private citizen can ask a lawmaker to make those changes at any time. But raising awareness isn't obviously just lobbying, it's, conversations like this, and it's we have one-on-one meetings with not only lawmakers, but their staff, because staff oftentimes are the folks doing the work behind the scenes, and making sure that people understand, look, this is what hunger looks like in your district. This is how many kids in public schools in your district are eating school lunch, receiving free or reduced price school lunch. Just those kinds of things that really, I think, the more targeted we can be with district specific information, the better. But also, I think there's just so many issues that elected officials have to be on top of that, it's our job to make sure that hunger is top of mind and addressing it, obviously. So I won't go into all of these in detail, but this is just kind of a list of the big areas or the big pieces of legislation and anti-hunger advocacy in Arizona over the past few decades. The Arizona Food Bank Network, which used to be called the Association of Arizona Food Banks. This is our 40th anniversary this year. So we started intervening at the legislature in 1986, a couple years after launching. I obviously wasn't in the role then, but I'm happy to provide updates. And so the progression, I guess the main thing to take away from this list is that you can see a progression from intervening very specifically on legislation that related to food banking or emergency food assistance, into sort of evolving into doing work towards access to public benefits and increased income so that families have long-term solutions to address hunger instead of just going to a food bank. So I'm happy to go into these, but high level Charity Food Bank Act, it really was an extension of the Good Samaritan law, which basically holds harmless anyone who donates to a food bank. If there are repercussions, they're civilly and criminally not liable. And so it extended that to organizations, and that really increased the ability for farmers and retailers to donate without fear that they would be sued. Hunger Hurts Us All was sort of a mini bus of bills that expanded funding for rural food banks so that they're not all just concentrated here in Maricopa County. It also started funding the school breakfast program, which is a federal program, but it does require states to put in some money. So that was an exciting, win for Arizona. It also had some funding for WIC, the Women, Infants and Children's Program, which is it's a great program. It's a component of SNAP. It's underutilized, and there are a number of reasons for that. I'm sure folks on this call know that better than I do, but it's good to see. It was good to see additional funding for that. Charitable tax credit, I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point, but when it got started, it needed some support to make sure that people who don't itemize on their taxes are still able to get money back if they donate to specific charities. And then from there, it really, we worked to get the hunger services line item, which is basically the funding for food banks in the state budget, increased over time. 1.75 million to 2.25 is where we're at right now. That's not a lot of progression in a long period of time, and it's a super small drop in the bucket compared to the state budget. So I think we'll be back there next year asking for some funding for that. And jumping to 2017, which is when I started with the organization, Arizona was the last state in the country to stop using fingerprinting for SNAP cards. So that was a hard one. I can't take credit for that. My predecessor, Oscar de los Santos, who's now the minority leader in the state house, made that happen, and it just makes it so much more, it's easier for folks to use benefits that way, and also it's just silly to fingerprint people at this point in time. And it was a partial repeal of the SNAP drug felony ban that all happened in the same year. And if you're not familiar, the SNAP drug felony ban essentially was put in place at the national level through the 1996 Welfare Reform Act. Thank you all for sitting on that Zoom with me at 7 p.m. talking about the 1996 Welfare Reform Act. That had a lot of ripple effects that we still see today, and people who were incarcerated for drug felonies were banned for life from participating in SNAP or TANF, so cash or food assistance. And states have the option to pull that back, and Arizona's kind of still working on it, but we did see some progress there. And then these are some funding things that took place over the past few years that we kind of pushed forward in the legislature. And the biggest success, I think, that I will highlight, because it's been a long few years to fight for this funding, but we got $3.8 million in the state budget for school meals in 2024 that goes into effect next year. Essentially, that covers the family copay for reduced price school meals. So if your child is eligible for reduced price, which means you're between 130 and 185% of the federal poverty line, you have to pay 30 cents for breakfast and 40 cents for lunch. And so this money would cover that. So the state will pick up that cost. It's the first time the state of Arizona has funded school meals in any way. And in $1 billion deficit budget, it was pretty exciting to see that bipartisan support for kids who need food. And so now I'll get into the Farm Bill. I'm not going to get into the weeds on it as much as I probably could. But if you're not familiar with farm bills, they're supposed to be on a 5-year cycle. And I believe that you had somebody from Bread for the World come speak about it, maybe. Okay, so yes. Okay, great. So you're experts. But the diagram just kind of talks through the process, and basically what's most important to know is right now, the House version of the Farm Bill has gone through its subject matter committee, which is the Agriculture Committee, and the Senate has not yet released a full bill. So they're at different stages in the process, and that becomes sort of a point for argument. But the House is controlled by the Republican Party, obviously, and the Senate by the Democratic Party. So they have drastically different bills, or at least the Senate proposal is drastically different from the House bill. So it's anybody's guess, but my 2 cents is that in September, when the federal fiscal year ends, we will see an extension of the current Farm Bill, similar to what we saw last year, which means it's baseline funding from 2018, when the most recent Farm Bill passed, with some slight modifications for inflation. And then they'll take up the fight again after January, I would say. Right, so we'll see the election, and then I don't think very much will get done after that, and then we'll start again next year. But I've been known to be wrong, and I'm ready for anything that comes my way if there is another Farm Bill fight. But just as an idea to give you an overview, the 2018 Farm Bill was the bill was 529 pages, and the total price tag was $428 billion. Now, again, that's over 5 years, but it's a lot of money that we're talking about, and it's a lot of people's lives that are affected. So having really robust conversations in the committee is important. And I think because of the political gridlock, we haven't seen that. It's been very one-way partisan bills. And so that's also just a list of all the titles in the bill, and Title 4 is the one that we focus on. It's nutrition. So the next couple of slides just go into the high level points of what's in the drafts that we've seen. The Senate proposal, again, that's not a full bill, and I have some links that we can maybe share the slides afterwards if people are interested. We haven't seen the full bill language, but we've seen a proposal from Senator Debbie Stabenow. She's the chair of the Agriculture Committee in the United States Senate, and a Democrat from Michigan who's been largely involved in a lot of fantastic programs over the years. So her bill would repeal that SNAP drug felony ban entirely for the whole country, which would be a huge, huge win for states like ours that have been trying to claw that back year over year. That first bullet point about supporting the thrifty food plan is very wonky, but essentially what that means is the formula upon which SNAP benefits are calculated only gets reevaluated every 5 years. And it really only looks at inflation, which of course is important. And obviously the price of food keeps going up. But there are other factors that should be taken into account when you're looking at how people prepare food for themselves and their families. And so this bill would allow for that. But the House bill would not, essentially. It makes SNAP more accessible to people who are active military. It makes SNAP more accessible to college students. There's some other modifications. We've seen a lot of benefits being stolen through skimming scams, yeah. And so it would make the replacement of those benefits easier. There's just a lot of great things in the Senate proposal, but we haven't seen any language. And then these are some other programs that are obviously important to food banks that would receive additional funding. So Emergency Food Assistance Program, those are the food boxes that go out from our food banks. The food distribution program on Indian reservations, those are similar commodity boxes for tribal reservations. And it makes some adjustments to the funding for those programs, and also the ability for those food boxes to procure culturally relevant foods, which in 2024 you would think does not take an act of Congress, but it does. And then the farmers market programs would also see some increased funding, which we're excited to see here in Arizona. That GusNIP is called Double Up Food Bucks. So people who purchase produce from farmers markets and some other participating retailers get dollar for dollar an additional benefit if they purchase produce. So any changes to that would be great. And then I think this is my last slide, that the House bill it has some good things in it. I'm not gonna completely discredit it. Again, it's a 900-page document, so I haven't read it all. But that not allowing for that reevaluation of the thrifty food plan really just kind of undercuts any other progress in the bill. So similarly, it would repeal the SNAP drug felony ban. It would make SNAP more accessible to older adults who tend to be on a fixed income, and so kind of churn out of the program when they have to recertify, and kind of saying that they don't have to recertify as often. But again, it's undercut by a massive, what amounts to a massive cut in benefits by not allowing for that reevaluation. And it does have some other good things to it. There's some minimal increases in funding. But overall, we know that for every one meal a food bank can provide, SNAP can provide a family up to 9. And it's the largest and most effective anti-hunger program that our country has. So any changes to that really have a bigger impact than program changes for food banks. And this is just kind of, these are some great photos from our day at the Capitol and then our trip to Congress. But our own Arizona Food Bank Network is kind of looking forward to what we're going to do in 2025. And I think we're really going to focus on, maintaining baseline funding for the Farm Bill programs, and then continuing the fight of supporting the strong Farm Bill in 2025. At the state level, that $3.8 million for school meals was a one-time budget line item. And so we will have to go back again and ask for that money Happy to say that we work with the Arizona State University on that. They have a research team, the School of Nutrition, that has done fantastic work for us. And so they're evaluating how that is currently going and if it's increasing participation, so we can come back to the legislature and say, look, you gave us this money and here's how it's helping. And then we're going to establish a community advisory council, which I mentioned a little bit. So I've been talking for a long time, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see if there are any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice. And yes, we will definitely send those slides out. I want to take this opportunity to let anybody unmute themselves if they should have a question or a comment about what Ashley has covered, and know that I definitely have a question that I want to ask, but I want you all to go first. All right. So Ashley, what is something that you're most excited for in this upcoming year?
That's a good question. I think around election time, it's hard to answer that question because it's a heavy time. I think we can all agree on that. But I do get excited for the start of a new legislative session, especially because I anticipate we'll see a lot of new members. And I think in 2022, it was something like 40% of the legislators at the state capitol were new. Which means we just have all sorts of opportunities to build relationships and to educate and to help establish some bipartisan connections so that we don't face the gridlock that we faced in past years.
Right, right. So when it comes to the elections, what are some of the things that we should, I know a lot of people have casted some early ballots or anything like that, but where are some places where folks can go to become educated on which politician favors the stuff that you talked about today that we think is important?
So the Arizona Clean Elections Commission, they used to do candidate debates, and maybe they will post primary, but this year the Arizona Capital Times had sort of a meet your legislators. They had 4 nights in a row where candidates came. It was all virtual, and we submitted questions every time to see what folks, what their platform was about anti-hunger and, how they would address basic needs issues. The questions did not get asked, so did not get answered, I should say. But I think those are worth checking out, and I can drop a link in the chat just to get to know your candidates. I mean, at this point, to your point, Ellie, folks have already probably cast their ballots for the primary, but it's a good place to start that website to learn more about candidates.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the Farm Bill, is that also kind of just with all of the national political turmoil that we've had, what happens if it gets delayed again? What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, there are positives and negatives to that. The negative, of course, is that it's baseline funding, which means it's not going to really accommodate all of the changes over the past year that we would need to see increased funding for in programs in people's lives, just in day-to-day purchasing of food. But the positive is that potentially there's less damage, right? So depending on how things go in November, there could be a change in party in either chamber. And so we could potentially have an opportunity for a really progressive and robust farm bill, or we could see a similar situation, but it just gives more opportunity for people to voice their opinions from their community, like this group, And hopefully see more committee hearings. They didn't do quite so many this year, which is a point of contention, because that's how we as private citizens and organizations get to see how decisions are made. And so hopefully we would see more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Oh, it looks like, yeah. Thanks for having me. Oh yeah. Just everyone's talking in chat, y'all. I love that. I love when people are talking in the chat. That's great. I'm grateful for that. What worries you the most?
Uh-oh. That's what I get paid to do. I get paid to worry. So
Right.
how long do you have? One of my biggest fears is always when we make these one-time changes at the state level, that we may then have to end that funding, right? So this funding for school meals has been something near and dear to my heart since we saw in the pandemic that when kids have access to school meals, they do better. There were a lot of mitigating circumstances, obviously, but then families went from full access to free meals all the time to return to normal to now they have some coverage with this state funding. And I would hate to see that revert backwards and then have to tell families, hey, this money that you haven't had to pay for a couple of years, now you do again. So that's something I worry about. So, and I think that's really on us to make sure that lawmakers and the governor don't forget about that, because it's a small amount of money, but for the people that get it, it's a huge deal.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So that's a possibility that could go away.
Yeah, I think one of the strategies that we've found most effective is to do this one time and then come back again and ask for it, which isn't maybe a great use of my time, and then we can demonstrate, right, this is working. So let's just keep it in there ongoing. And by then we might need less money. Actually, it could go from 3.8 to 3.5, depending on participation in other meal programs.
That's exciting. I know that it's been making a difference, just from, Arizona Faith Network has launched a summer listening session. And so continue to build on our one-on-one meetings with folks in the community from all walks, meaning non-faith and faith practitioners, all of that stuff. And when we talk about hunger, folks are very, very grateful for the efforts around the work that you've done and others to make sure that this program exists. And so I think my final question for you before I go is, what is it as we get post-election, when we start to see and understand the political landscape more, what is the thing that you recommend to get people to tap in to you?
How can they reach out?
Work, like you, or the work to do the advocacy, whether it be in person, phone, whatever it is.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll put my contact information in there first and foremost. And we have an advocacy newsletter that folks can sign up for. If you're anything like me, though, your inbox gets flooded with those kinds of things, especially this time of this season that we're in. But when there are more targeted asks, and we try to be very judicious about that because we don't want to bombard people with requests all the time. Now is kind of not a peak time to ask people to take action, but certainly it will be soon enough. It's just reaching out to either your state lawmaker or your member of Congress or either of our senators, and just explaining sort of why these programs are important to your community. And we will provide obviously talking points and things of that nature, but really I think what's most effective in every meeting I've ever been in is people who can speak from the heart. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that impacts you or your family directly, but obviously if you're coming to this meeting on a Wednesday evening, then you care about this issue for one reason or another. And it's really just kind of speaking to that in either an email or a phone call, or if you ever want to, you'd be welcome to come with me to any meeting I have at the legislature.
That is fantastic. And that, like I think Ashley points out a good thing. If you've joined us in the middle of summer when you could be doing so many other things, you're here because you care. You are here because you see and know that you can make a difference, and know that at Arizona Faith Network, we're here to help support you in any way. If it's something we can't do, we'll say no. And we'll guide you, hopefully, with all of our connections, our network, to other folks that would be willing to do it. I know some of the things that I have heard over the last few weeks in our listening session is churches becoming engaged and having real conversations during coffee hour, after service, to say, hey, how are you familiar with, what are you familiar with, is that, and doing teasers that way. So if you have a really unique, exciting, creative way in how you engage your community, whether faith or not, in conversations like this, please do reach out to me at the Arizona Faith Network and let me know, because it becomes a resource. It becomes a tool that we can add to the toolkit in order to make really impactful change. I remember back in 2016, I was working for a different organization, and we were hosting a program on the role of the humanities in combating racism in health fields, and in incarceration fields. And one of the ladies she was an older lady, and she had put on her comment section at the end of the program, like, what is the one thing you can do to, impact change? She had said, I'm going to stop sharing things on Facebook until I verify that they're real. This was even before, right? This was before when disinformation or the weaponization of narrative and all of that stuff became what it is now. And I remember looking at it going, huge, like huge. It took me like a conversation with my coworker for her to go, no, let me tell you why it's important, that this is the simple, probably the most impactful thing that somebody from that evening's program could have said that they did. And so I say all of that to say, you can make a change, and you can share how you made a change with us, so we can chuckle about it and share it with everyone else.
Yeah, if I can just add one story, which probably is not as good as that one, so maybe I should have just left that at the end. But Congressman Juan Ciscomani, who's in Southern Arizona, he's a newer Republican member, rising star, young, has a big family, and I had the pleasure of getting to meet him when I was in DC recently. And he's on the Appropriations Committee, so he has a big role to play in all of these decisions. With the House Agriculture Bill coming his way, there was a piece of it that was called the SNAP Choice Pilot. And essentially what it would do is restrict how people could use SNAP. And so it's ironic that it was called SNAP Choice. Basically, it would say you can't use those benefits on certain things, soda, and sugary items, which is really hard to define. But our food bank, and the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona, had built a relationship with Ciscomani's office and was able to reach out to him to say, look, we had a woman who came in recently, and it was her daughter's birthday, and she wanted to be able to use her benefits to buy a birthday cake. And it's like that conversation was a game changer. And I think sometimes there's a lot of things that people don't realize, and everybody's life has different circumstances, but it's just something like that is critical, and it's much better coming from a constituent, but also a community service provider than from someone like me.
Yeah, amen. Well, I want to thank you all. We have Mindy, Kara, or Kara. Where I grew up, it was Kara, but I know there's different pronunciations, and Tasha and Dean and Tammy and Nancy. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and Ashley, for your time in the midst of, I know you have so many things going on. And so thank you for always being a supporter and saying yes to me. I'm going to cry the day that you tell me no, because now I'm spoiled. But I wish you all so many blessings for this wonderful, wonderful time of the year. I do know one thing for sure. No matter what happens in our election season, many people, such as Ashley and you all here, have cared for your community, and we will continue to do so. And let's continue to support one another. Blessings and prayers to you. Please visit www.arizonafaithnetwork.org to learn more about some really exciting programs that we have coming up. And blessings to each of you. Have a wonderful night. Ashley, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Appreciate
Bye.
everybody being here.
Yeah.
Bye.